All right, listeners, it's Ryan and Megan, and welcome to the Mental Health Mixtape, a podcast dedicated to fostering open conversations, sharing stories, and exploring a diverse range of topics related to mental health. So hold on to your seats as we sit down with some amazing guests to get their perspectives on the ever-changing landscape of mental health. And for all you old folks, no need to hit the record and pause button. Just sit back and let us navigate life's playlist together. During this podcast, you may hear stories about traumatic events and our guests' experiences. There may be discussions about suicide, traumatic events, and the outcomes from these events on personal lives. If you're struggling with anything you hear, please reach out to your peer support team, psychologist, call 911, or head to the nearest hospital. In Canada, you could call Boots on the Ground peer support for first responders at 1-833-677-2668. Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. And in the United States, call 988 for the National Crisis and Suicide Lifeline. It should be noted that the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
So what's funny about this? Well, yeah, welcome, Andy. Okay, before we jump into carrying on with our conversation, we should probably tell people who we're talking to. Andy, it is honestly, it is such a treat to have you here. I have heard your name over and over and over again. I feel for like the last decade, so it's remarkable to me we've never actually been face to face to this point. But I just want to extend my gratitude to you, not just for being here with us today to talk about all things mental health, but just like I see you pop up on LinkedIn and you're doing the battlefield bike ride and you're always advocating within your service. And I mean, you're just really a champion for the mental health needs and the wellness of the people that you're serving and for the people in your organization and beyond. And I really admire you and I really admire your commitment to all this. So thank you for all you've been doing.
Well, I'm not going to say I'm not think I'm going to be blushing, but it's an absolute honor to be here. When I look at it, it's being a veteran in a first responder. Unless you self-advocate or advocate for each other, nobody's going to come and do it for you. So it's just something I believe in, and if I want to help myself, I have to help others in the process. So it's an easy decision for me to do those things.
Yeah, and I can just echo what Megan said. I had the pleasure of actually meeting you within a short period of time of hearing your name. And, there was a really kind of quick, robust connection, or at least that's the way it appeared, your background, your history. I've got a military family. My grandfather served in Ortona, and that kind of linked into the previous battle ride that you did with Wounded Warriors Canada last year, or this year, actually. And, that's, we're starting to see more cross-pollination of our military veterans moving into public service in the front lines. And that's an honorable piece to do. But, I guess the question we always start with for most of our guests is, how did you get to where you are today? Or how did you get through all of what you've experienced? Of course, I did a little bit of a dive in your LinkedIn profile, and other than what we know, I mean, you're with the Hussars. You did some deployments in the past with the Canadian Armed Forces, and then moved into policing. And we always ask that: how did you get to where you are as a mental health advocate? Was it always like that, where you're able to sit and speak out and really ask for what you need?
Well, how long have we got?
Well, we got a long time, Andy.
Someone said I should have written a book, or I should write a book, but then I said, well, hey, what would I call it, and who's going to read it? But I wasn't born in Canada. I was born in Hong Kong. Actually, my father was in the British military, posted there. So British military hospital in Kowloon, actually, in 1969. And then my dad got really sick about a year and a half later, and he was sent back to the UK. And we served all over the place. I think I was very, very young. We were in Northern Ireland in the early 70s, and I didn't know it at the time, but my dad suffered his own post-traumatic stress during that time, losing comrades and experiencing some of the terrorist actions and killing that went on there. And I remember going to school on a green bus with an armed soldier, and was sent home at least twice a week because of the bomb threat. So a little village called Ballykelly, which is northwest in Northern Ireland, and while he was patrolling the streets of Belfast, my father left the military and we went to Germany. I went to a German school when I was very young. So I mean, I can speak some German. I've just forgotten a lot of it. And then my parents split up, and I went back to England, and I have a brother and a sister, and my extended family, like they all live in the UK still. Like I only have my kids here that because my dad passed away a few years ago from cancer. So I didn't understand my father until I had to deal with my own mental health, because there was a fair bit of resentment there. And my dad came to Canada in 1977, and I was still in the UK. And I mean, not to dive too deep into the bushes, but my family life wasn't great. So there was some home trauma there that caused me to want to leave. So strangely enough, my mother said, "Okay, fine, go," and that was that. I came to Canada in '83 in February. I seem to do everything in the winter in Canada, so because I'll get to that a little bit later. And I went to high school in Brampton, which then I got picked on because the girls like the English accent, the boys not so much. So it's suspended twice in the first week. My dad's like, "Knock it off, or you're going back home." So I learned how to talk with a Canadian accent because everyone says, "We don't have an English accent as well." I can, if I want to, and I was back in the UK in July, and it comes back pretty quick. So. And in high school I joined the reserves because as much as my dad was what he was, like he was still someone that I admired and what he did, and I thought the military was a very noble profession. If I go back in time, like being a Brit, like we've been fighting for like thousands of years, so I can date my ancestral background in fighting for millennia. Both of my grandfathers were in the World War. My grandfather's in the Royal Artillery, fought Rommel at El Alamein in Egypt, and my other grandfather was in the Royal Ordnance Corps. So that's one thing I've learned, which is recently what I've learned, is like trauma can actually be passed down genetically through generations. So it is what it is, and it's something that you have to deal with it. I mean, you don't know what you know until someone tells you. And I went to high school in Brampton, and then I graduated. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so of course I joined the Canadian Army, and of course I go to Cornwallis, Nova Scotia, right on the Bay of Fundy in February.
Oh God.
And like I said, there's a bit of a pattern here with the February bit, like in winter. So. And then went to Gagetown in New Brunswick to battle school, and then they sent me to Germany, which was great. It was in the Black Forest, a place called Lahr. It's just on the French-German Swiss border, and I spent 4 years there, which was the first part was kind of cool because I got to see the wall come down. I got I got a big piece of the Berlin Wall, so.
Oh, really?
Wow.
It is now, but yeah, it's just a piece of concrete with spray paint on it. And yeah, it's nothing like at 2 o'clock in the morning being snowballed and doing a run up to the East German border. So, but it was my first experience with a ramp ceremony in Germany. I had a couple of people from the regiment take their own lives, which was rather tragic. And at 20 years old, and I wasn't. What am I supposed to do with that? So what everyone else is doing, you just go to the junior ranks and drink. And alcohol isn't the solution, but as soldiers, that's all we knew how to do: fight and drink. So 1993, they closed the base and disbanded the regiment with the Hussars, and I got posted to Calgary. And I wasn't there very long. So that was August of '93. And then we were told about workup training to go to Bosnia in May '94. So they sent us to California because it's too damn cold in Alberta. So, going to Wainwright or Suffield for a couple of months to learn how to do whatever it was we were supposed to be doing there is just a futile, because all you care about is warm. I mean, I've been out in Suffield in the middle it's minus 70. It is like no fun at all. Everyone like the cold these days, but I just blame it on my old age. So, and then that was it. May 94, we landed in Split, Croatia, and we had no equipment. Basically, we were told just find someone that's about your size, get their helmet and flak jacket and their rifle magazines, and then get on the truck. And it was a 21-hour truck ride through mountain passes and goat paths, all the way up to Visoko, which is a small village 40 kilometers northwest of Sarajevo. And so,
can I ask you a question? Did you ever talk about, like, before or as you were being deployed, did you talk with your dad about it? Like, did he give you any tips or inputs or anything like that?
He did. He I forgot to mention, he was, my dad would always tell stories about his time in the army, and he was in Cyprus in the late 60s. When the Turks and the Greeks seriously weren't getting along, and some of the stories that he would tell me were actually, they weren't dangerous, but the way he would spin it, you could help but laugh. I mean, being British, we have this very dry sense of humor, and everything has some type of humor to it, and can help but laugh. But so yeah, he actually gave me better advice than what I learned when I was in the army, because we had no idea what we were going to, or what to expect. Calgary was, so going from the UK, to Toronto, which is, I remember it being fairly warm. It didn't get super cold, and then back to Germany, and then they sent me to Calgary, and I went, "What's this? Like, why are all these plugins at the mall for?" I had no idea. I'm like, it's my face hurt when I go outside. So that and the elevation, I was like, God, I can't breathe here. So it's like, oh, get back to Europe, great, weather's better. So my dad would joke about it. He says, just keep your head up, head on a swivel, and just take care of business. And I would, they at least afforded us phone calls every so often with a satellite phone, so you could talk to family and things. So I would talk to my dad routinely, and he'd talk through some things, because like, if I hadn't had that, like, I really would have struggled there, because there were some things that you don't expect to see, and do they tell you that that's what you're going to see, because they didn't even know. And they plop you in the middle of a war zone where there is no, there's supposed to be a ceasefire, but there really wasn't. And the thing about peacekeeping missions, and someone said it best, peacekeeping isn't a job for a soldier, but it's only a job a soldier can do. And it was a struggle at times, because when I think I was 23 at the time, 24. I didn't know who to talk to. I had nobody to talk to except for some of the guys that I came to Calgary from Germany with. The guys that I was in Germany with, we went through basic training together. I'd been with them the entire time, so I could at least rely on them. So people talk about internal support networks. We inadvertently create our own. And funny enough, I still have it. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to meet with a bunch of them in Oshawa. So we have a few drinks, have a few laughs, maybe cry a little about the good old times and people that we lost along the way. But it's what keeps us grounded, I think.
I also think it's so interesting that you just instinctually did that. It's not like someone said to you, you need an internal support network. It's like you just found your people, right?
Yeah, and that's why a lot of veterans struggle, though. When they leave the military, they lose it. They no longer have that, and they're kind of in a sea of whatever it is, without any type of support. And there is support there, but it's not the same. And because at the end of the day, it's all about trust. It always comes down to trust, and who you trust to tell your story, and trust with your feelings, because nobody ever wants to, lay it all out there and then be told, yeah, you know what, suck it up, princess, move on, life, because man up. That doesn't really help.
Yeah, and Sebastian Younger's book, Tribe. Have you ever read that? Yeah,
I've read it a couple of times.
Yeah, it speaks quite heavily towards that inherent sense of, your unit, your tribe within a deployment, and then what's missing when you're done, right? When you come back, or exit out of the military, or, even police force, we can translate that across public safety, because you lose that family, that trustworthiness of the people that, experience the same things you did at the same time, right?
Yeah. And it's funny how he would, in that book, when he talks about how, or like I listened to a podcast from him, and he said, not veterans that are broken, it's society that's broken. Is when he talks about the Navajo, and how he talks about when warriors would come back. He says society no longer does that. So, he said if we can't fix the society, then at least fix it so we can help our veterans. And I know people are trying. It's just society doesn't know really what to do, because they're not used to it. And I find that, the towns that are around bases tend to be a little bit better at helping their veterans, but veterans tend to go home to where they come from, and some of those places are quite obscure. But after that tour, I was so disenfranchised with the military, and I was drinking heavily and fighting well, then all the bars were on 11th Ave, and I lived at 14th 11, so I could just walk to the bars and then walk home. But
yeah, we know it. That was our stomping grounds too. Because were you disenfranchised because of your how you were received on returning, or because of what had happened during deployment, or both?
Both, I think. I just wanted something different. I'd moved so much my entire life that I felt like I needed to grow some roots somewhere. I was just tired of being on the move all the time, like a nomad. My family was here in Ontario. Like, yeah, I had some, military friends in Calgary, but, my family was still in the UK. So not really a lot of family support. So, and like I wanted to come back to Ontario, and the army wouldn't move me. So, I was, and then they closed the base in Calgary, which was, I'm like, oh, this is just getting worse. I'm like, they close every place I go to. Like, I'm starting to think it was me. But they didn't close Edmonton, though. So I'm like, nope, definitely not me. So, loved Calgary. I applied to Calgary Police in '95, but they weren't really hiring. So I came back to Ontario, applied to Peel Regional Police, and the recruiter says, "Didn't you just come back off tour 3 months ago?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, no, you need to wait, come back and reapply in a year or so." I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." So, I mean, I did do that. I reapplied in '98, but and so I told my warrant, I say, I've had enough. Like, I want out. Like, I just can't do this anymore. And he says, "Well, we have a mounted troop. Like, we have horses. So," goes, like, "I know you need to change, but you won't do that." So I'm like, okay, I never thought I'd ride horses in the army, but off I went. So it stuck me on a green horse. I managed to stay on. So, I will say, I think inadvertently it probably saved my life. I suppose it's the first iteration of equine therapy, if you want to call it that, because asking a 1,500-pound animal to do something, you got to figure out how to ask it, because it won't. You just tell it won't. And we went all over Western Canada doing musical rides, and we used to do the Calgary Stampede and Klondike Days, and we'd end up in Fort St. John and Battleford. Like, we were all over the place, and it was good. It was refreshing. It was being in the army, but not being in the army. And, I had an animal to look after, and that relied on me. And, he was quite the character. And, the military give you these box lunches, and I sat beside the trailer one day, and I look back, my sandwich is gone, and I look up, and it's in his mouth. I'm like, I'm throwing my sandwich back from him. And, but yeah, he really did do me a lot of good. So, I stopped drinking. I changed my life around. And, and during that time in Calgary, I had a colleague. He was a rag tech. I knew him from Germany. He slit his wrist in the bathtub upstairs. His girlfriend Marnie came down, and she's like, so my roommate, who was actually a firefighter here in Toronto, we see each other, like, he was over the house a few months ago. bandaged him up, got him out the bathtub, and saved his life. But it really was, a rough patch in my life, and still not having anybody to talk to. And whoever you did talk to, they're like, you were where? You were doing what? Like, well, okay, whatever. Like, nobody cared. Like, Bosnia. Like, and, there's a little known fact is, there were 25 Canadians killed on that tour. And, there was no highway of heroes. Those aircraft landed at Trenton at 2 o'clock in the morning, and nobody knew about it because I don't think the government of the day wanted to know that peacekeepers were being killed in overseas. And there was more to it to that, but there's a great book written by Louis Mackenzie called Peacekeeper. I met Louis Mackenzie when he was a major, when I was in recruit school in Cornwallis, actually. And I have a lot of respect for the man and admiration, because he told everybody said what he did, said how it was. So it really was a sad state of affairs there. So yeah.
So just a quick question, Andy, like when you look at it now, and before you got into the equine part of the military, like, do you think that, like, was drinking a way to deal with the loneliness?
That, and probably the anger. I was just angry. Maybe I was angry about a lot of things. Like maybe I was angry about my childhood. They talk about now about being predisposed to PTSD if you have a traumatic childhood. So maybe that's where I was. Maybe I was just angry at a lot of things, and picking fights and drinking, and just angry at the world, I think. And like I said, if it hadn't been that intersect, I'm not sure where I would have been. I've never looked at taking my own life or anything like that. I've always found something worth living for. So, it was a shift for me, and everything happens for a reason, and certain people come into your life for a certain reason, and maybe it's just they give you a nudge, point you in that direction, and that's the direction I needed to go, because I truly believe that you are where you need to be. So that's the fork that I took. And strangely enough, everything I've done in my military career and onward has always come back to benefit me in the end anyway, because you don't really know what it's for or what it's meant to be, but there's a reason why it happens. Sometimes you never know, and sometimes it comes back and you go, oh, okay, now I get it. But, but the horses were a good time, and I still have a pair of horseshoes from that horse, like I'll always keep. And they retired him quite a few years ago. His name was Shadow, and we were doing a musical ride in Medicine Hat, and at the end of the musical ride, they do a charge, and I leaned forward, and he threw his head back, and he caught me right in the face, crushed my helmet into my nose, and like he opened me up for about 6 stitches. So we had to do another musical ride. So we had to give him some tranquilizer, and my face was all cut and like all puffy like this, and he's flopping around. He could barely walk. Like it was so much. It's like a comedy, and I couldn't eat afterwards because I kept splitting my mouth open. But it was quite the adventure.
Is Shadow still alive?
I think so. Yeah, like he's I think he was born in '92. So they put them out to pasture. They've worked their entire lives. The amount of units still exists. Like they're quite busy. So they closed the base in '96, which was a real travesty in my opinion. But I went back and had a look at it when I was there in June and July, and I was like,
it's not the same.
No, it's not. And then we went to Edmonton, and I think I went back to the tanks. I did one exercise in Wainwright. That was like, and by August, I think I'd had enough. I said, I'm done. I threw my application into Peel Region. I went home for an interview, and they said, okay, yeah, you got a job. You started in August. And I was like, okay, see you later. Packed my stuff and did the 36-hour drive home. And yeah, that was the end of my military career.
How did that feel? Like, that's pretty momentous, and especially since you made the decision
Yeah.
for how many years you'd been in, it sounded like it came to a close pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was, like at the time I'd had enough. Like I just, and but one of the things was, like only commissioned officers could walk through the front building, and everyone else had to walk through the back door, kind of deal. And it was the smallest thing, but it just kind of snapped. I just went, you know what? I put my pants on the same way you do in the morning, and I'm still a human being. And why are you better than me just because you have this insignia that's greater than mine on your uniform? Like, so. I said, like, if that's my military, this is how it's going to be. And, at the time, like, there was no promotions and they'd frozen the pay. So I'm like, okay, so really, what do I have to look forward to here? So I think I wanted more out of life. I wanted something different. And, you'd have these old, crusty old warrants and sergeant majors saying, well, there's nothing out there for you. Life is never going to get better than it is now. I went, yeah, I don't think so. So off I went. And then, strangely enough, when I got hired on with Peel Region, it was like a cascade of everyone else leaving behind me, because people were showing up and applying in Ontario. People were getting on with Calgary. Like this, I probably know about a dozen police officers in Calgary that I served with in Edmonton. Just not even wanted to live in Edmonton, and second of all, they also wanted something different too. So,
Why did you choose policing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an easy question. Like when the because I never went to university or college, and coming out of the military, like the skill set that I had in the military, not really transferable into the civilian world, as far as technical skills anyway. Like, sure, I can blow shit up and smash doors and things like that. And my dad said, well, he knew a lot of PO officers because he ran a body shop down at the airport. So, he knew the recruiting officers said, like, just go see him. And I went, okay. So I went and saw him, and the rest was history. So, and strangely enough, in my class, my intake, there was a bunch of guys from Petawawa, the RC from the RCR, so, and the Dragoons. So, we're all kind of on the same path, right? We've all had enough of the Army and want to do something different. And it was 10 years, like it went by very quick. And when I look back, I don't begrudge any of it. I don't regret any of it. Like I probably would do it again. I may have done some university courses while I was in. That probably be the only thing I would change, but the rest of it, because I'd like to think I am who I am because of those experiences, and I kind of like who I am. I think most people like who I am anyway. Maybe I'm just kidding myself, but anyway.
What's the saying that if you look around and you can't figure out who the asshole is in a group, it's probably you?
Yes. Or like, I hope I'm not like that guy.
Exactly. You want to find that person, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, there he is. It's not me.
Perfect.
So, yeah. So policing was kind of an easy transition. It was very similar. It's very regimented. There was a rank structure. And you didn't need a university or post-secondary. You just needed post-secondary and whatnot. So, I had a whole ton of reference letters from colonels and majors and people that I'd served with in the military. I gained when I was in the military, I worked hard. I did my job, and I did gain a lot of respect from a lot of people that I worked with, and they still say the same thing. Like, you were a great soldier and those things. So. So when I applied to policing, I was like, okay, and I found it quite easy. I went to the police college. I was like, well, this is great. There were people that were crying and stressing out, and I'm like, well, what's the problem? They're like, well, it's the first time I've been away from home. I'm like, okay. So, and I'm like, first of all, you don't have to pay for your food. You don't have to do the dishes, and you don't have to cook it. I'm like, this is a win. Like, it's like, what's the downside? So, I mean, it was only for 12 weeks. And, I worked there at Peel for about 2 years, and I was commuting. I met my ex-wife. She was in my class, actually. And I moved over to York Region in 2000. And, I've done everything I've wanted to do in policing since I've been at York. You know, it was probably a great move because you know, York has facilitated everything I've wanted to do. I wasn't on the road very long at York, and I went to the TAC team, and I did that for a short period of time. I had some struggles there in personality. I was the only guy to ever get on the TAC team, so there was a lot of animosity there. I don't know if it was jealousy or whatever you want to call it, but really wasn't treated very well. And you know, I was told I hadn't paid my dues because they have an alternate program, and that didn't sit well with me. And I'm like, well, I may not have paid my dues in, you know, York Regional Police, whatever, but trust me, I've paid my dues in life, and I deserve to be where I need to be, and that's here. So you know, I left after a couple of years because it was somewhat like the military, and I was like, yeah, this is very reminiscent. Like, it's not really what I want to do, and I never really thought to join the TAC team either. But the district out, and they have a gym, and one of the people that lived there, they would come and work out, and he was on the TAC team and said, well, you're military, why don't you come and try out? And so I did. Otherwise, I was like, yeah, I was on the fence. And you know, I do have some residual issues from explosive entry there. Like you know, I did have a quite a concussion from one of the blasts that caused some discomfort, and that was on my road to the multiple concussions I've had throughout my adult life. But you know, like, I did enjoy the work and the people that I worked with in ERU. Like, again, it also served me well when I left ERU. And it's funny, I haven't been in ERU since 2005, but it was like, oh, when did you leave TAC? I'm like, I haven't been in TAC for like 15 years. Like, so.
I'm just reflecting on the fact that, like, you've had what, a 33-year career in uniform service. Does that sound right?
Actually, I joined the reserves when I was 17, so probably longer than that.
Longer than that, then, yeah. So that's a lot of years.
Yeah. So just changed one. I mean, you know, the funny thing about policing is I've never really felt like I fit into it. Like, I still feel like I wear a green uniform underneath it. That's how I identify first. Then I'm just a soldier in a policeman's uniform. Like, that's how I see myself. So I don't know why that is, and I don't think that'll ever change. And maybe that's just because I'm proud of that service. I mean, I will tell you that, you know, when I was younger, I put policing on a pedestal, you know, up here on what I thought it was, and then I became one, and I was, you know, absolutely, you know, like, disappointed might be a word, but it wasn't what I thought it was. And I know that we romanticize things, and then, you know, when we get it, it's like, oh, it's kind of anticlimactic. I'm like, so, you know, it's not what I thought it was. More so, like, it was a lot more like the Army than I thought when it came to how they treated people. You know, in the early 2000s, you know, like, when something happened, or you were involved in something that was traumatic, it was, okay, buttercup, carry on. Like, yeah, we've all seen stuff, get over it. And you were like, okay. So we go back to work, go every day. And you know, 96, I ended up in intelligence unit. You know, I did a whole whack of stuff while I was in there. I was doing anti-terrorism. I was doing witness protection, VIP security, and then I was doing guns and then I went to guns and gangs. And then I was seconded to the OPP doing about outlaw motorcycle gangs. So the Hells Angels, running projects. And then I went back to uniform for a couple of years. I got promoted. I was running the drug team in the Criminal Investigation Bureau, and then I hit a wall somewhere around 2017. I mean, I was struggling long before then. And you know, when I look back at it in retrospect, it's like all the signs were there. Yeah, it might have been around 2014 actually when I started to show some symptoms. that I just couldn't hold on to, like, being short tempered, and, small things would just set me off, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't function half the time. And basically I was just functioning just on pure willpower, because I just felt like I had to keep up this stoic persona of coming to work and being that guy that everyone looked up to. And, I was letting down the team if I didn't show up. And, I didn't want people to, think ill of me, of, oh, such a wimp, like it's, so, like my ego was pushing me forward. So, my current partner, Teresa, I think it was around 2016, she sticks this book in front of me, and I looked at her and I looked at the book. I looked at her, and it was a book on PTSD. And I looked at it and I said, what do I read that for? She said, just read it. So I read it, and I went, holy shit. And that was it. So that was when my journey into my mental health started in 2016. And I started seeing, I contacted Veterans Affairs. They helped, like, they weren't great to deal with, but, they did help me out some. They gave me a K number instead of paying for some therapy, because York at the time didn't have great benefits for that. And they still weren't on the wellness path of, hey, like, come and talk to us, or, like, they weren't there yet. And, like, I just didn't trust anybody, not with that, definitely not with my history and what I was going through. So, I saw neuropsychologists. I've been to CAMH, I've been to St. Mike's, like I've probably seen so many specialists, like I've lost count, actually. But I've tried the medication, like the SSRIs, like, they just don't work. MBRT doesn't work. And one of the things I can't track, my eyes jitter when I track things. So, I remember the doctor at the neuroscience doctor at St. Mike's, and he diagnosed me with anhedonia, which is really what I had, because I just, I didn't enjoy really much anything anymore, except maybe going to the gym. But that was functional, because I needed that to go to work, because, it's important to be in physically good shape. And he said, well, this is the best you're going to get. I was like, I don't think I like that answer. I mean, I'm not quite there yet, but I've been and done a lot of things in the meantime. And I had a great therapist. Her name is Barb Ann Schutz, and at a place called the Trauma Center near work. And they just deal mostly with first responders and military veterans dealing with trauma. So, she really helped me out a lot. She got me onto a study with the University of Toronto, and their brain therapy institution, with a thing called PALMS. And I don't know if you've heard of it, but it goes on your tongue, and it fires at impulses to the back of your so, because I can't, if I close my eyes, I can't spin around, I'll fall over. So, and people, so when I went to see them, they're like, so I was telling them what I do. I said, I still play soccer, and although I don't head the ball anymore, and I said, and I ride a bike. And they're like, what? How do you manage to do that? Because my inner ear, the signal doesn't get from my ear to my brain, so I rely on visual feedback and muscle feedback. So that's why part of my struggle was I was being tired. I was tired all the time because I'm exhausted from trying to balance myself all day. Wow. So after I did that 17-week program, my balance is fantastic. Like, I'm not tired anymore, and I'm balancing on bosu balls with my eyes closed. So it's amazing, some of the things. So
what happened with the anhedonia with that? Did that improve?
Yes and no. It depends.
We should probably define what anhedonia is.
Yeah, I was going to
for
say,
anyone
maybe
who
the
doesn't know
listeners are going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's when you lose a passion for things and nothing really makes you happy. You're just kind of in that, just treading water. feeling the entire time. So
Clinically, it oftentimes goes along with depression, and it really is the notion that people can't experience pleasure. So like,
Mhm.
generally speaking, we want our mood to be, maybe neutral or kind of euthymic, meaning we generally feel okay. But people with anhedonia, it's like they can't sort of seemingly feel that pleasure, and that it can happen for a lot of different reasons. A very common experience with PTSD is that when people are perhaps so suppressed in their emotional reactions because of over arousal and arousal dysregulation, like that impacts our feelings. And oftentimes people end up feeling anhedonia.
yeah, I mean, I have these, these spikes where I feel happiness. So I'm like, so I was like, oh, I can feel it. So it's there. So it's hope, but because my default emotion is anger, like it's been stuck, like that light switch is stuck for a long time. And, suppressing those feelings for, about a part of 20 years, it's like, eventually it took 20 years for it to go, hey, I'm here. You need to deal with it now. I think it was about 28. I think it was January 2018 at work. I had to take a knee. I was like, oh, yeah, I can't function. I couldn't recover from the night shifts. And, luckily enough, my superintendent was, he was my sergeant when I was in ERU, and, he knew I was a veteran, loved the military. And, he said, like, I've known you for a long time, and if someone like you can sit here and asks for something, then we need to listen. And he did. So he said, how do you feel about going to training? He goes, I know you can't go back to the road, so you still have a lot to offer this organization. So is that where you want to go? And I was like, absolutely. So I started training in March of 2018. And I've been there ever since. And it's the best job. So it's the most rewarding job I've done, I think, in both military and policing. Only because I get to help mold other people and make sure they have the tools that I never had. So it's I never and I never really thought I would sort of end up in this sort of championing mental health. And the reason for that is, I mean, cycling was early 2000s, like I was racing mountain bikes. That was my thing. And then in 2017, when they started the Highway of Heroes route, the Winners Canada, which was from Trenton to Queen's Park, and Tom Creek, who's the commissioner of the OPP, is a huge cyclist, and he was my boss. He was the deputy chief at York Region, and I've known Tom a long time. When I was in ERU, he was a sergeant in traffic, so we used to work out in the gym, and we talk about stuff and stuff. And then he was my inspector when I was in intelligence. So I have a lot of respect and admiration for the man. And he also has this unique way of nudging people in the direction that they need to go without it being so obvious. And he said to me, Andy, you're a veteran. They've got this Highway of Heroes bike ride. Did you want to come and do it? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can ride a mountain bike. It's a road bike. How hard can it be? So
famous last words. Those are always my famous last words.
Yes, I definitely paid for it. And so I have a friend, who has a lot of bikes. To do this ride, he goes, well, here, you can use one of my bikes. So we head out to Trenton, and we're riding along, and I didn't know how to fuel, I didn't know how to whatever, and we're 80 kilometers in, and both my legs are locked out, hamstrings and quads, and I'm standing there in agony. And Steve Topham comes by in the Jeep, and it's embarrassing. I'm standing there, and he's on his knees with a roller, and he's rolling my legs while I'm stuffing a bag of salted chips into my face. If someone had a picture, it would be like they wouldn't be able to stop laughing because it was quite humorous. And then so I get back on the bike, and then I would pedal with one leg until it cramped out, and then I would switch legs for the last 40 kilometers. It was agonizing. So and then they get up in the morning and do it again. So and anyway, the rest is history. So I think I've been on my mountain bike twice since. So but every time I tried to ride with Tom, it kills me. So I've just I've learned my lesson with that, if you want to ride faster, ride with someone that's faster than you, but that guy is on a different level. But him and I have had numerous conversations about mental health and its importance. And a few years ago, he gave me the challenge coin for championing mental health programs. Probably about 2 years ago, we did a ride from Aurelia, and it was to promote mental health and things. And like Tom does the ride for mental health every year, and I see him on the Ride to Remember, which it's the 700 kilometers from the Ontario Police College up to Ottawa, and those are long days, and it's a sufferfest, but it's for a reason.
Well,
So
that's actually what's going around my mind, Andy. Is like, I think there's probably lots of answers to this, but like, it sounds like the cycling and what it means has taken on significance to you. So like, what does it represent for you? What is it symbolic of?
Yeah.
Freedom, actually. It helped me free my own mind, I think. It gives me something to focus on, and when you're sort of out cycling in a group and you're chatty and you're having a good time, and like it's enjoyable. That's the fun part, because it's more of a social sort of thing. But when you're out there on your own riding and you just listen, I just like to listen to the noise, the road noise, and just everything else. And it allows you to like, there's a lot of noise in the world, and there's a lot of noise here, voices, even your own. Like it's okay to be just quiet. Sometimes most times I'll drive home from work without the radio on and just numb out, just listen to the white noise, because it is quite soothing, and so that for the bike, that's what it does for me. Like the ride to Ottawa, I mean, is very different than the battlefield bike rides. Like like you don't really need to be shaved to do the battlefield bike ride, but the one to Ottawa, if you don't do the training,
Thank God you said that, actually, because I think both Megan and I are going, oh, what are we contemplating here? 75K a day? Between the pain and on the undercarriage side, do we start training now? Like, my head's just went, what am I doing?
I'm not saying you don't do no training. You gotta do.
We're gonna do some training. I get that. Yeah. Well, we were trying to sign up for the Memorial Death March in March, so why not?
Maybe go to the odd spin class, you'll be okay. But and invest in a really, really good quality pair of bib shorts.
Yes, that is the ticket, I think. Yeah.
The one with extra padding in the places that you need padding. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. I got onto these Italian bib shorts, and I don't wear anything else. I mean, they're not cheap, but I can tell you, it's money well spent. Yeah. So
good to know.
I feel like we're gonna be knocking at your door for these kinds of tips over the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things, I just want to go back for a second. Like, one of the things I'm just struck by is, you let yourself take a knee, and you let yourself start down the process of asking for help and going that way at a time when it still wasn't all that commonplace. And it sounds like you've really held an important position in your organization, and people have really looked to you and at you as like a leader and a mentor and all these things. And I guess I don't know if it's anything more than just a reflection of how courageous I think that was. And yeah.
I think, really all started, I think I wrote an article in King County Magazine about equine therapy. And, a few people called me out on that, and because they took credit for something that wasn't theirs. Little did they know that I knew the guy that started the equine therapy program in Alberta. So, and it was Tom then said, it took great courage to say those things. And if you have an issue with Andy, then you need to take it up with Andy. And nobody ever called me because, they knew what I was saying was actually true. And, I think it was probably around 2017, 2018 that they started to go in that direction, when it was like they were looked at the road to the mental health, which is okay, but it's meant for the military. Like it doesn't really, it fits, but it doesn't. It's kind of like that square peg in the round hole. Mm-hmm. It'll fit if you hit it with a sledgehammer, but it's not the perfect fit, right? There's something better. Mm-hmm. And it was at the point, really, I had to do something. So it was either that like, I'm not sure what I would have done, but I basically, I looked in the mirror and I said, listen, like, if you don't sort this out now, then you're going to be in some serious trouble. So you have to put your ego aside and ask for some help and not care about what people think.
Yeah.
And because I was worried about my career, what people thought of me, and I just said, the hell with it. Like just one foot forward, and off I went. And for the first little while, like I'm like, I was just waiting for it. I was waiting for someone to go, like, oh, and start saying things like that, but nobody did. Like, it was the weirdest sort of phenomenon for me. And then, like, nothing was perfect. I made a couple of mistakes here and there that probably poor choices, but nothing that cost me, any type of paperwork in relation to being reprimanded or anything. Is just not the best choices. But at least, I looked back at them and learned from them. And then, I still continued with the Wounded Warriors and doing the bike rides, and, continuing to see, these different therapists and doctors, and I ended up at a concussion clinic in 2018 that year, because prior to then there aren't actually a lot of concussion clinics around.
Mm-hmm.
And WSIB had denied my claim because I didn't go to the doctor, and the doctor didn't diagnose me with a concussion, which they don't anyway. You just have symptoms of a concussion, so they denied that claim. That was that. And I got into a serious fight with somebody off duty in 2010, trying to arrest a guy that was choking out the loss prevention officer. So anyway, that's a story for another day.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh my gosh.
I
You need to write a book. I'm gonna be the one to chime in on that too. Like,
yeah, me too. I just want to loop back, considering the time frame that you just shared about, around 2017 is when your partner put the book on your desk. Is that about the same time frame? Like,
Yeah, somewhere around it.
I just have to think about the courage it took for your partner to do that.
Yeah.
Especially after being, like, I've had partners for 6 years, and there's something there when you click with an individual, whether you're sitting in an ambulance or patrol car or wherever you're at, when you've got that long-term partnership of, there's that level of trust that, I call it work wife, work husband, whatever you want to call it. But, having your partner recognize, and maybe for a while, and then saying, here's a quiet way of, hey, what about, have you thought about this, and putting that book on the desk, like, that's a huge courageous moment for them as well, because thankfully you're receptive, because I can't imagine if you weren't. What does that do to your work relationship, or that relationship with that partner? That there's a lot of potential, and I've seen it erode in other areas of my previous organization that I worked for. So
I mean, I'm going to loop back to, everything happens for a reason, and you end up being right where you need to be. And, obviously, and, people come into your life for a reason, and maybe that she's in my life for that very reason. And, if it definitely was, if it wasn't for her, I definitely wouldn't be where I am now. Has it been perfect? No, we've had some doozies of some disagreements and yelling and screaming matches, but I'm a Capricorn and she's a Taurus, so two horned animals walking, and very, very fiery and very blunt and straightforward, but she's she's more on the liberal side, where I'm more on the conservative side. So we kind of even each other out. And she works with kids. She's a child and youth worker. So, and I'm a cop. So, we're from two very different worlds. And, it was very, in that she's often said to me, she said, you never told me about I said, well, because here's the thing, like, you wouldn't understand, for me to spill all that out to you and tell you what that was like. And I truly don't think she needs to hear it. Like, I don't think it would change anything. Because, and Steve Toppin said it best, is, trauma is trauma. Like, it doesn't matter whether you get in combat or in a car crash downtown. Like, it's trauma. Like, she just, understand that I went through something that was traumatic, and, and I just didn't have any mechanism in place to help me navigate through it, or come out of it the other side. And being stuck in that loop for such a long time has been very difficult. And how your brain wires itself, and I mean, there's a lot of neural pathways that have myelinated between then and now. And so, and you can't undo those pathways. You just have to make new ones. Which is something I've learned relatively recently about how we learn in motor pathways. So, I'm still learning. I see an endocrinologist. Larry Comer is his name. He runs the Brain Science Institute down in Burlington. He used to be the Toronto Rock physician, and before that, he was the head gynecologist in Ontario. I don't understand how you go from one
How
to
you
the
get to
other.
one from the other? Yeah.
That's
Yeah, because
can't connect those ones together.
no. Anyway, so so he's all about optimizing brain health. So I do a whole bunch of things for help with my brain function, and because my biggest worry is with the head trauma and all the other things is early onset of brain disease. So now it's all about, and the other thing is my other half, or Teresa is her name, is before she became a child and youth worker, she's a holistic nutritionist. So like my diet is completely different. Like I'm probably the healthiest now than I've ever been. I run the recruit class, and I do PT with the class, and we push-ups with them. Like, and I'm doing push-ups all day long, and then I go, like, really, you should be ashamed of yourself. Like, I'm twice your age. They're like, well, how old are you? And then I tell them, and they're like, what? I'm like, well, I didn't get here by accident.
Right. Well, you know what? It's so interesting you say that. I mean, I think, major props to you and shout out for schooling the young kids, because that's fun. But,
Yeah.
one of the things, and Ryan and I, when we have these conversations with people, or even in when we teach together, and I think you and Andrew Carl Quist are probably the same, it's trying to get people to understand that these are not categorical habits. Like, you don't take care of your mental health once by going to see a therapist once. Like, it's all of these, it's like the river with multiple tributaries. You have to have all of these different things that are flowing in to hopefully have that optimal state of well-being, and trying to get people to understand that there's things they can do to take care of their mental wellness and their mental health that just overlaps with what they're doing for physical health. It doesn't have to be so separate.
Yeah, it's
Right.
the mind body, right? The mind body now, the terminology from, at least the mindfulness and meditation practices and what I've trained in is, it's one word now. Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions influence our body, and the body influences our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So how can we work in that landscape? And it's a journey. I heard you use that word a little bit earlier. My journey is the same thing. It's, I would say, from an optimal human performance standpoint, I'm probably at the healthiest I've been, and I'm 51. And I can't say that, sure, I could lose pounds, but, seeing therapists, practicing mindfulness, self-awareness studies, regulation, all of those pieces connect in this interesting space of, you know, optimal human performance, if you really want to get down to it.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are important, and you just can't just focus on one thing. But I suppose if you focus on one thing, your mental health being the most important. And one of the things in policing and the military is they talk about how you need to go and educate yourself further, and go into university courses. And now we're doing the Schulich School of Business and all of these things. And I said, well, as far as mental health programming, what are we doing? Because if you don't look after the brain, like, the rest of it's useless. Everything else, like, you have to look after your mental health first. Everything else will fall into place behind it. But if you don't have your mental health, the rest of it is just, you might as well just spin your wheels, because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So we like, there's an awful lot of people that don't come to work for a multitude of different reasons, and those, they have their own reasons for not coming to work. And I definitely wouldn't be the one to sit here and judge, because everybody has a reason for that. And and maybe they haven't got the help that they needed. And it, the whole BOSS program, and how it sort of landed on my feet was, the BOSS program is a mental health program, and it didn't come from our mental wellness unit. It wasn't pushed from that angle. It was pushed because of my relationship with Scott Maxwell.
Yeah.
and and I said, like, we need to get this here. And I'm like, well, how am I going to make this work? Because there's a couple of barriers here. And because we had done like our events coordinator, like I know her from doing the Ride to Remember, and I said, Karen, can we set up a meeting with the chief and Scott and Phil and talk about this boss and the trauma informed leadership program, because I think we need to really get it here. And so she said, okay, sure. So anyway, this meeting happened, and of course Phil talked ad nauseum.
I don't think Ryan's met Phil, so I don't think he knows what that means yet.
God bless Phil. And I mean,
Yeah,
like,
love you, Phil, if you're listening.
he left no stone unturned. And I mean, even whatever I didn't know about boss, I definitely knew about it after Phil had stopped talking. And the chief said, "This is great. Like, we should have had this yesterday." And I'm secretly inside my head going, "Yes, here's the home run."
Oh.
And so anyway, we agreed to pilot it in its first iteration in September 2021, and as you both know, the rest is history. So I think we ran trauma informed leadership twice that year, but they the feedback and the commitment from the organization and our police services board after that was overwhelmingly positive. And so it's great. And like, we've run it in every class since, and we will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. And we have built upon it. Like, our organization has one of the most robust wellness centers now in all of Canada. Like, we have a couple of onboard clinicians and social workers, and peer support unit, and it's really been working well for us. And the recruits now, I have one of the social workers. They include the families, so they do a family night where they do a Zoom session, and they learn about what's available to them for benefits. And so what I've been really pushing is the family inclusion.
Yeah.
And and we've had this conversation. I had this conversation with Shonda and Andrew about it's great that we give people boss. I said, but who's the support network? Like, if they don't know what's going on, like, they're useless. So how do we include them? Or how do we mirror boss so they understand what's happening to them and say, here's this book on PTSD. You should read it because these are all the signs. And then Shonda told me in June that the Responder First program is good to go.
Families First Responder, yeah, and it's
which is super happy about that. And because unless people push things, and not to take no for an answer. And no might just mean no right now. That doesn't mean I always look at it. It doesn't mean no forever.
Exactly.
So okay, we've gone 5 minutes. That was 5 minutes ago. So how am I going to get around this? So I need to make this work. I need to come up with an alternate strategy to get around it, and make it work. So but it's always for the right reasons. I've probably sat through 4, 5, 6 of Andrew's sessions, and every time I learn something about myself every time. Andrew likes me in the classroom because I always stand up and go, yep, everything that you talk about, every single thing you talk about in this program is me.
Well, and I love Andrew, and a shout out to Andrew because he's such a dynamic presenter, right? Like, he's just so much fun to listen to. But that's really cool. Like, I think that's so cool that it's like the repetition of exposure to that information doesn't get stale for you. That's amazing.
Yeah, it doesn't. And especially when it's something that you're passionate about and you truly believe in. Like, every time you hear it, I go, oh, I remember. Okay, I remember that. I go, okay. And maybe the third or fourth time that you hear it differently, and go, oh, okay. Why am I thinking about that differently? And then you go off and, okay, now I understand that. And then if you hear it enough times, then it's like exactly where you are at the time, and exactly what you're dealing with. And I every time I'm like, I wish I had this, like, long before I even joined policing, because life for me would have been very, very well. Not only me, but a lot of people would have been very, very differently. I think it definitely would have reduced a lot of the suicides we've had in the last, however many years. And I mean, I haven't even talked about that aspect of things. Like, like my military police friends that have taken their lives over the last, the time I've been in uniform in both professions is like staggering. And I actually had to stop the funerals after a while because it had such an impact on me that I'm like, I'm having a hard time dealing with my own feelings, like, and now this, and still not trusting people to tell my story. And I'm at this point in my life now of like, either like me or don't. That's not my problem. So
is that age? Is that due to age? Because I think I'm almost at the same point.
yeah, I'm 54. So if I'm not there yet, I'm never sure when I'm going to get there. But I'm like, like I do things because I think it's the right thing to do. And if you don't like that, then that's on you. Like that's your problem. I'm in the office and people bring their little lunches in and they're taking it to the microwave and they see me looking at them and they're like, "Don't judge me." I'm like, "That's not my guilt. That's I'm just happening to be looking over that way." And like, saying that you feel guilty, that's on you because you should be eating that. So it's nothing to do with me. It's all you. So they're like, fine. So but at least I have everybody in the microwaving everything in glass now versus plastic.
Oh man, yeah.
So,
I just brought 5 dozen Krispy Kreme donuts to our place because I had to help my nephew with a fundraiser. So I'm like, get them out of my house.
Yes,
Anyways,
yeah.
that's the sign. I mean,
Once in
I
a
find
while,
myself curious. Oh, sorry.
yeah, once in a while is okay. See, 80
Yeah,
20.
once in a while is okay. That's right. You talked about how you were seen as a good soldier back in the day, and I
Mhm.
can't help myself wonder, like, was that a good soldier according to the military, or is that a good soldier like, as you might define it now? Because I don't know if back in the 90s a good soldier was somebody who is clearly as like passionate and committed and courageous, particularly around mental health as you are.
Well, it was just being a professional soldier. It wasn't necessarily about the emotional part. It was more so about the technical aspect and
Okay.
being proficient at doing what my job was. And even in Germany, like I was a tanker, so I love tanks. Like they're like I still have chills every time I see one because they're just, I don't know, they're impressive. Like, and they're so big that they just shake the ground. And this reunion tomorrow it's at the Ontario Regiment, which is actually a military museum where they have all those tanks that I served on, which makes me feel like very, very old because
They're relics in the museum now.
they're
Is
all
that why?
relics.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a relic standing next to another relic. So, and it was, I took pride in my uniform, like even wearing the green combats, like I would iron my combat because they should be a representation of who you are. And, and even still now, like your uniform speaks to who you are.
Mhm.
And, if you look professional, then you act professional. And, so that's how I was viewed, and strangely enough, I'm still viewed that way. Like my uniform is impeccable. Like like I and I'm physically active, so I get a lot of compliments of, say, look, you look great in the uniform. Like you're the epitome of what a police officer should sort of look like, right? But that's just the shell, right? So if you're talking about a shell, then sure, then you're a great cop, you're a great soldier. That doesn't speak to what's inside.
Mhm.
Well, and I guess that's kind of what I'm underscoring is like, I think maybe nowadays with all we've learned since the early 90s, and certainly this would track with some of my education and when my career got started. To me, I hope nowadays that we can, when we think of a good soldier or we can think of a good cop, it's like somebody who is tactically or operationally proficient, and professional and all those things. And also someone who can be, who can lead from that place of challenging the stereotypes about maybe what historically a good soldier or a good cop was, like this pseudo stoic, nothing gets to them, you know persona, right?
Yeah, and but I mean, our organization is really looking to shift the culture. Even our new promotional process is about people first now. It's how do you lead your people, not necessarily the technical aspect of things.
Yeah.
It's how do you help, how do you treat and develop your people, which is great. And really, that's truly what it should be, because at the end of the day, we're even the military and policing, it's in the service of others. Like, so really, serving others look like? So if you're helping other people, well, you should also help your own people, because we shouldn't be treating each other with disdain and saying, there's nothing wrong with you, get on with it, and most often than not, people that are saying that have their own issues. They're just there's a lot of people in denial still, and I have had people reach out to me and say, the interaction I have with you was like you're very compassionate, and thank you for your assistance, and because that's how I talk to people, and the way I look at it is, I've been to that place and I know what it felt like. So when I speak to them, then I speak to them like I would be speaking to myself back then, and what I needed then. So when you talk about trauma informed approach to people, is you have to understand that everyone you talk to probably has some level of trauma at some point in their life. So you don't really know what it is, nor should it matter. Like, you should always treat people with dignity and respect. And even with the recruits, like even the people that you're dealing with that aren't the best of society, they're still human beings, and they should still be treated with dignity and respect, because they haven't done anything to you personally, and it's up to the courts to decide what happens to them. So treat them accordingly, because everybody makes mistakes, and I think at the end of the day, not everybody as their kids say to themselves, man, I can't wait to grow up to be a meth addict. Whatever happened to them, and that's where they're at. That's the best version of themselves of that day. So meet them on their level, and sometimes you might be the change that helps them in the right direction, and you just never know. And has that happened? Absolutely. So
And I love that perspective, because I think something that I think about, and I try to practice in my own life, but also in my work with people, is like, yeah, okay, there's who you were, and there's who you are now, and there's also who you're yet to be,
Mhm.
and I think that's especially in this, caretaking, human centric sort of work that we all do. It's like, if you've lost hope that people can change, that's probably something you need to look at, right? Because I think that's one of the most beautiful and inspiring things about this experiment we're all having on Earth here, is just seeing how much things can change and shift as we move forward, right? There's endless possibility.
yeah, absolutely. And when I deal with people, is how do I want to be remembered? So I'd like to think my career as policing is like, what's the legacy that I'm going to leave behind? Like, I love the fact that I get to train recruits. And when I look at the rosters now, like almost half to 2/3 of the platoons I've put through as recruits. So there's about 600 of them in the last 5 years, and they'll always remember who I am. I play the disappointed dad role with them, right? It works great. I've never yelled at them, and I just say, I'm really disappointed. Like, I know you can do better, so next time we'll do better. But in the meantime, we're gonna do some push-ups. Okay, it's a team building event, so.
I can promise you that if we find ourselves on the battlefield bike ride, and you try to get me to do push-ups when I'm disappointing you, I'm not going to be here for it. Like, I can promise you. Just keep your push-ups and keep on moving.
Right. You know what, Megan? I'm really disappointed.
Speaking of battlefield bike ride, I get the feeling like, most of our guests this last few guests that we've had, we can just continue to speak for literally hours.
And hours. Yeah.
And I'm sure at some point in time we'll loop back in together and have another, amazing conversation. I have to say thank you for the vulnerability that is your life, that you just literally laid out in front of us for the last little while. And I'm so humbled that there's people like yourself that have gone through what you've done and are willing to share your experiences. From a first responder that's been in relatively a short period of time, 23 years. There's other people that have gone longer than I have, but when I sit here and listen to what you've been through and the trajectory of your journey through the military, through policing, through the vulnerability to say I need some help, I think that's the message that there's a lot of people that, hopefully listen and take away from, that it doesn't matter when you started your career or how long you're into your career. There's opportunities to get better. But, I just want to loop back to that battlefield bike ride and plug away. What is this thing? We've got a short 5 minutes, but if Megan and I choose to head over to the battlefield bike ride in June 9th to 14th, I think it is.
Uh,
I think I need to
yeah.
prepare my mind for this thing and maybe even my spouse, because I haven't even told her yet, even though we're talking about
just put it in a box, wrap it up, and let her open it at Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
no kidding.
It's I will tell you that France, that part of France is relatively flat, so you have a couple of hills there, like it. So, if we were going to Italy, like the ride in June, there's a couple of days where I was like, oh man, enough with the hills already. And it's definitely not like the Balkans when we went back into 2018. Like that was the most exhausting and emotionally and physically demanding thing I've ever done in my entire life. But the France is relatively flat, so you'll be okay.
We picked a good year then.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Next 2025 would have been better because that's in Holland and it's as flat can be.
Mhm.
So, but once you do one, chances are you come back for the second one, especially if it's a good time. But, there's just one other thing I wanted to say, and it was, it stuck with me for a long time. And it was what Romeo Dallaire said about, PTSD being an honorable injury. And that's how I look at it now. I own it. I'm actually proud of it. Because I'd like to think I did some good to earn it instead of looking at it as a weakness. So when people ask me, I'm more than happy to talk about it. So
That's beautiful.
mhm.
And like on the topic of legacy, I can, certainly in my life, and I think within Wayphone and Boss and all of the people that we are here representing today, like you have a legacy with us. Probably a week doesn't go by where your name is spoken and spoken well. And that's just a small microcosm, I suspect, of the people that you've touched and the
Mhm.
impact that you're having. So I just want to echo Ryan's gratitude to you and come back to that. And I feel quite confident we're going to see you in France, and I look forward to having that experience with you and hearing more about you and your amazing journey in this thing called life.
Me too. This is actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I want to thank you again for having me. Talk to you too about my life. I mean, it's it is been an interesting journey for sure, and it's not over yet.
No, not at all. Just getting
Oh,
started as far as I hear.
Mhm.
yeah, it sounds like it. Well, thanks, Andy, for coming on the show, and we look forward to our future chats.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Okay, you too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mental Health Mixtape, brought to you by the Before Operational Stress Program. We hope today's conversation has resonated with you and provided valuable insights into navigating the complexities of mental health. Remember, your well-being is our priority. If you or someone you know could benefit from the support and resources offered by the Before Operational Stress Program, don't hesitate to reach out. Take that first step towards a healthier, more resilient you. And here's a special treat for our dedicated listeners. A 15% discount waits for you when you sign up through the code provided in the show notes. Investing in your mental health has never been more accessible. We appreciate your continued support and commitment to breaking the stigma surrounding mental health. Let's keep the conversation going, and until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.